You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of the Freio Music Podcast. In this episode, I sit down with flutist Earl Correy. Earl's music is gentle, it is echoey, it is mellow. Earl started playing music in his early 30s to deal with an emotionally charged situation. So it just proves that you don't have to start in your youth to discover music as a healing force. So stay tuned and enjoy.
My name's Earl Correy, and I make music. I play the native style flute. I am not affiliated with a native tribe. I do have native heritage. However, I didn't grow up on a reservation and not affiliated with a tribe. I play music with a number of musicians around the area of Boulder who I started an open mic, and it was drawing a lot of people who like to play, they like to improvise, and they like the sound of the flute, and they wanted to express that type of music. And so as we went on, we began playing outside of the open mics at different events and venues, and really just having fun with the music and exploring things that would come out in the present moment. And I think every moment has a song waiting to be discovered, and every instrument has a song. And so we would seek to open up to whatever that was and play it. And we generally, after we would play the song, and if we happened to record it, we would listen to it, and it was better than a lot of times we would remember it. And so that way of making music seemed like a good way to create together. It seemed like the forces of playing with different people, we were creating something that was better than what I could do alone. We were really feeding off each other. And so I have always enjoyed playing with other people. And when you get a new person and they have something that they want to express, when you bring that out in the moment, and what I've found is different combinations, the music has a completely different voice. And so being open and allowing whatever comes out is a lot of fun.
And when you guys are creating music, is it purely improvised, or do you have a plan going into it?
It could be a combination, really. We might have a rough plan. So we'll have a plan of the one thing that we try and do is we try and start with a certain key, and we try to have well-tuned instruments. And so that while we're exploring, it sounds good together. And so it's important to have, with a lot of the big problem with playing the native flute is it's not always tuned to a scale. And since I'm playing with other people whose instruments are tuned, it's important that I have high-quality instruments.
And so let's talk about that a little bit, because I don't think everybody is familiar with flutes like you are, and the notion that they are not tuned to a Western scale, which have particular steps and frequencies. So what flutes would you choose? Let's say if you were in the key of G, is there a G flute that you have?
Yes, and generally the flutes are tuned to a minor scale, and they will do a little more than an octave, and it's a pentatonic scale. And the thing that makes it interesting is you can hit some flats and jazz notes to make things interesting. So I would have a one flute that plays G in a mid-range flute, and then I might have another flute that plays a lower scale, so it's a bass flute, and then a flute that plays a high scale, one octave above that. And so I might have 3 G flutes. The flute that I have the most octaves in is the F sharp.
Okay. And why the F sharp?
It just, at a coincidence, people had flutes to sell, and that's what I bought, and I kept expanding on that. But I've later determined in playing, and this might come out a little later as we speak, the flutes resonate with different, everything's in a frequency, and so the F sharp is really the key of nature and resonates with nature. It also is usually the last song I play in a yoga studio because it is the one when everyone's laying on the floor, mellowed out, where I like to end things and provide closure in the performance.
And that is in the key of F sharp.
Right.
And so let's go with F sharp for a moment here. If you have a flute in the key of F sharp, are all the notes on your flute in that scale?
Yes, they would be all in the minor scale.
Minor scale of F sharp.
And so if I play with instruments that are tuned in the major scale, then I can, for example, I know most musicians play folk music in the key of G. Well, I know my E minor will go with that, so I'll have a corresponding flute that I can pick up that will match, even though it's a minor scale.
And are all of your flutes at minor scales?
All of them, but the ancient flutes were actually tuned in a major scale.
Interesting.
So the original flutes that were played in the Four Corners area by Kokopelli would have been tuned in something close to the major scale. There's a lot to think about when tuning a flute. There's the distance of the holes, the width of the holes, the width of the flute. So they probably had some sort of formula that they were using, 2 fingers between holes, or a branch this size that they were hollowing out to get that flute.
Interesting. And the length of the flute is also very important. Is that correct? For the wavelength?
Yes, it is. But probably what is a bigger determinant of the sound of the flute is the width, the size of the chamber. And there is something to be said for like an instrument made of wood. You can actually hear the sound of the wood or the resonance of whatever it's made from, and so that's a big part of playing any indigenous instrument, is each one seems to have a spirit of its own.
Well said. So let's go back to your early childhood. Tell me about your first musical memory.
I see. My memories were, I enjoyed listening to music, but I was not, grew up on a farm, so I was working on the farm, and I skied every weekend and played soccer. And so I was riding my motorcycle around or getting into any trouble that I could, doing those types of things, like I'd say a fairly typical boy, but my sisters were the ones with piano lessons. And so it never occurred to me that I had any music talent. However, I did love music.
Your sisters were playing the piano, and when did you start realizing that maybe there's something in it for you, or maybe this music could call you or you could call it?
I had an experience where I took care of my mother for 2 years. She had breast cancer, and I had through that experience, I began to question a lot of things that I had taken for granted, and I was in my young 30s. And as I did that, I had a bit of a spiritual awakening, and so I began to read a lot of spiritual books and began meditating. And through that, I found it really helped if I had music to listen to. So it was music that would enhance that meditation. And so there were certain qualities of the music that I would like, but I realized that one of the common things that that music had was flutes, and that seemed to have an emotional undertone to it that was very appealing and expressive, and it appealed to some of the pain that I was facing at the time, as well as the joy. And so it had a lot of expression to it, that type of music. It never occurred to me that I would be able to actually play the music, but I did listen to it, and it did sink in when I went down to the Denver Indian market and purchased a flute and immediately started playing. I found suddenly I had a vehicle to express those same things, that it wasn't just me listening, it was actually something that was more personal. And so I spent a lot of time using that as just a form of expression for myself. And I think the native style flutes really make music accessible in that way, and a lot of people do start up with that instrument because it's probably the only thing that's easier to play is a drum. It's very easy. You have to cover the holes and you have to control your breath. And other than that, there's no strict guidelines to play. You really just play whatever you want, and you can go out in nature and play what you hear, and everyone plays a little bit according to their own personality and style and how they feel. So the native flute really made music accessible to me.
This seems like probably an obvious question, but is there a wrong note?
There really isn't. You can, as I play, a lot of times I hit notes that I don't want, and so what I do is I don't replay those notes. And a lot of times in experimenting, as I'm playing, I will play something that should be wrong, but it's right because I entered into it the right way. So instead of a single note being right or wrong, I think it's more the relationship between the notes, and that how you go into the note makes it either right or wrong, and that the relationship between the notes are really what creates the song. And between that, underneath, there's always the silence, and so the relationship is guided by the silence.
Tell me about the first time that you played the flute for somebody else. You mentioned it was initially in your early 30s, you picked it up and you would go into nature, and it was a self-expression, and you were expressing yourself through the flute and dealing with some of the pain that you were experiencing and joy that you were experiencing at that time. But when's the first time that you decided to share it?
I was sharing with friends as well as family all along, and so, but the first time I went and actually shared beyond that, I was playing at a spiritual trade show down in Denver, and in fact, someone heard me play at the park or somewhere, and so a lot of people who happened to be in my hearing radius would hear, and so that was the first way of sharing. I might go to the mountains and go up off the trail a little bit and sit on a rock and play. One of the real fun things to do is to sit and play and just listen to the echo and how it sounds in a particular location. what I noticed is a lot of people, I'd be looking down on the trail, they would be walking along and fairly distracted, maybe looking at their cell phones or talking loudly about things that went on when they were at home, but they wouldn't be really connected to the experience of being in the mountains. And then when they heard the flute, suddenly it would go silent. And of course, I would have fun with it. I would just play a little bit so they would think they heard something, but they wouldn't know for sure what it was. And so then they would be listening for it, and I would wait till they started talking again. Then I would play a little bit more. And then it would go silent again, and then I might start playing. And there were times when I would meet people, and I would be back at the parking lot, and they would be coming in, and they would say, "Oh, you were the person playing the flute." And they would thank me and say that it really made their experience, it really connected them to their hike and brought them in and grounded them. And made them listen to the woods instead of, let's say, their phone or each other, or talking about problems and all the stuff we face, and taking that up there into the woods with them.
What about the first time that you recorded your flute or put a microphone to it?
Let's see. I think it was always fairly rough. I would have used, let's say, a phone or something fairly rough to record. And so there was always a technical battle to learn to start recording and what equipment to use. What really helped me out was I bought a Boss loop pedal. And so then I could record, but I could also pick up different flutes and start looping with things, or I could pick up a drum and add a drum beat, or I could find another song that and play to it. And so that allowed me to really explore, but also to start creating songs. The first time I did play live, what I found was I had always been improvising, and that was good for having fun. But when it came to sharing, it wasn't going to be consistent enough to be able to to play. And so I had to start taking those improvisations and refining them and making them into something that was more consistent and repeatable. And so the loop station really allowed me to capture whatever I was doing, and then I could relearn it. It wouldn't go away and disappeared into the ethers. And I might record 20 loops, and then I might throw away 18 of the things that I had started and only keep 2. But then I would work on those 2 for a time until I got them to where I wanted them. Really, to me, it wasn't about the song, it was about the context of the song. And it was more, instead of about a recorded song, it was more about creating media where I could combine pictures and I could combine video of a hike, let's say, or a greater experience than just the song itself. I could put the song in context, and I want to combine it all, so I began learning the Adobe Cloud and all the Adobe programs, the audio program and the video program in order to start combining things that I was collecting.
And the context that you were laying around your songs, was that context an expression of where the song originated? Like, did you invent the song on this particular hike and then you wanted pictures from that particular hike? Or would you kind of evolve it?
I think we have things that are attention floats to. In our day-to-day life, we have things that are almost like dreams that begin to solidify, and then suddenly it's everywhere, and we're seeing this one thing. For example, I had a song called The River of Time, and at the same time I was creating it, I was on a hike, and I came across an area where they were diverting water down a gully. It was the entire Little Thompson River. Actually, it was cascading down this mountain, and I spent about a couple hours with my phone capturing the water falling. And so I had this song about a river, and so I was able to slow down this falling water and create this beautiful video of the water falling down the mountain. And so and in another case, I was creating a song called The Midnight Moon, which has kalimba in the background, and then it has flute over the top. And I had just finished recording that when suddenly I heard great horned owls outside. And so I ran out with my phone and I began recording them and following them through the night. They were going tree to tree and recording their sound. And so I was able to combine, it just so happened the hooting of the owls was in the key of D, the same key as the song, and it blended together perfectly. So I think in looking at where songs come from, that seems like they create themselves. We just have to find it, what song is in the moment, and listen and be aware and see what's resonating in our lives.
So this is kind of a philosophical question, but why create music? Why music?
I think from what I can observe, I think everyone has something inside that they're trying to share. And it might be through yoga, it might be through spirituality, it might be through something profession that they do, working on cars. But so I have, as I mentioned, had a spiritual awakening. And when I first had that, we have the tendency to go out and really want to share, and we want other people to join us in that journey. And we have certain things that we're discovering that we're very excited to tell people about. After trying to recruit others into that, we realized that I came to the realization that we really have our own paths, and we're all, as I say, we have many paths to the same location, the same endpoint. And so I wanted something to support other people's paths, but to also give them enough space where they could discover for themselves and go into a place within themselves where they could discover their path. And so rather than me talk about spirituality or things that are working in my life, I really wanted to just play what was in the moment and to be able to have a voice in that manner, in a manner that really opened up possibilities. And did not close down possibilities for other people.
What gave you the confidence to pursue music?
Originally, I wouldn't have been very confident playing in front of other people. However, I think if what you're giving is a gift, it's not about me, and it's not about my confidence. It's really about sharing with the other person in a relationship with the audience, just like the notes have a relationship with each other. We have a relationship with each other. And so it's really not about me. It's about the relationship with other people who are also part of the music. From that point, confidence isn't really an issue, because the confidence would either be within me as a separate point, or the lack of confidence would be within me. But in a sense, I'm not there. I'm in the relationship, in the moment with other people. And so because I'm in that location, that allows me to just enjoy sharing.
Great. And what do you do prior to a performance to get yourself out of, so to speak, your own head and into that relationship with others? Is there a particular routine or meditation that you do that helps you clear your mind?
A lot of times I'll go out and I'll greet people in the audience, or I'll talk to people and connect with the audience. A lot of times I want to just take a moment and go into a place that's quiet. I might go outside and just look at the sun setting, look at the sunset, listen to the wind, listen a little bit. And then I might just do a little bit of a warm-up where I play the flute and listen to the flute itself to see how it wants to be played. And so those are some things that I try and do. I also try and set up where I have enough time to take that time. Sometimes you just make do because you're busy and you go set up, and then I have to play right away. And in that case, I do the best I can, and I try to become as centered as I can, and I try to, again, focus on the audience.
What is music?
It's really a frequency, as is everything, from what I understand. It's a frequency and a certain bandwidth that is within our reality right now.
Right. And you said something earlier that I really, really enjoyed. You said every moment has a song waiting to be discovered. How do you discover that song?
It really comes with the approach, I would say. And I would say it's a yin type of approach, where if you have let's say I would equate it to someone who's making art and creating a sculpture. You could start with a piece of clay and add to it until you have what you wanted, some sort of sculpture, or you could take a block of marble and take away what doesn't belong and end up with the same thing. And so whether you're taking something away, what that doesn't belong, or you're adding, I think those are two approaches. The taking away is more of the yin approach. And so what you're looking for is you're listening for the silence to hear what notes don't belong. And that, to me, creates the type of music that I'm making. Now, there are other people doing other types of music, and maybe the other approach works better for that. And so in listening to the silence and taking away notes, the song just appears. It appears. Sometimes I'll hear it loudly, and sometimes it just takes off in my flute, or sometimes I don't even, to be honest, know what I'm playing until I listen to it afterwards. And I said, okay, that was the song at that point. I just let my fingers and my breath and those things decide what needs to be played.
And when you are building music in that way, through the subtraction, obviously something needs to be there to subtract, or do you have to add it and then subtract away to find the core of what you're trying to express?
Generally, there's nothing there to begin with, and we start in, and let's say, and where I find that's most important is when playing with other musicians, that they're on the same wavelength, because let's say you have 4 musicians, but maybe 2 should be playing very subtle background noises and then 2 people taking the lead. And so where it really comes into play is when you're playing with other musicians and you're wanting to create something out of the silence, but we tend to want to also fill up space. And so knowing, okay, that space doesn't need to be filled up. Let's leave that space there. And the greatest time when I've actually seen that happen is I was playing with a Navajo friend who plays classical guitar. He's a friend named Tony Crank, who's a excellent guitarist. And he very much listens to the space. And so he and I really seem to just dance together with the music. And we were in the middle of a performance, and out of nowhere, we stopped and just sat in complete silence for about 3 seconds, and then started up going again. And somehow we both had heard that silence needed to be there. And we put it there, and it was really a neat experience to both feel that silence was needed and to be able to create that.
Are any of your recordings available online? And where would they be?
Yes, you can search Earl Correy, and you could download things from Bandcamp. I also have a SoundCloud site under Earl Correy, under which you could stream, and that's where I tend to put the more recent things that we're doing, and then YouTube as well. I try and also post something every month on YouTube.
Do you have a preferred method if somebody really wants to reach out to you and ask some questions? Or
yeah, I would say email is probably one good way. Send me an email. You can always, I have a calendar on my website, and so that is probably the best way to figure out what's coming up as far as events or live type performances, is to look on the calendar. Or one of the areas that I'd love to collaborate on is how to involve dance. The music works really well for yoga because it turns people inward and really lets them become aware of their bodies. But the other area is dance. And so I would say, I'm very open to any type of collaborations. I also have a friend who created a documentary about horses, and I was able to contribute music, and the music fit really well with the video of the horses. And so that's another area I would like to work more within, is providing music for soundtracks. Simply because a lot of times I hear music that goes with the soundtrack, and you'll have some old west or western scene or nature scene, and what you'll have is a symphony orchestra. Well, it's beautiful music. However, it's again creating a different emotion. It's not connecting people to how that place would have been, and so being able to contribute to film is a aim as well.
Great. And your website?
Yeah, it's a naturesedgemusic.com.
Great. And people can find your calendar and email through that website?
Yes.
Excellent. And Earl, is there anything else that you'd like to share with me or the listener?
Well, I think another story that has occurred to me as I've been out in nature playing music, and it was the genesis of the name Nature's Edge Music, is that the music is really created by blowing breath against an edge. And so that's where that came from. And after I created that, I began to see, again, edges everywhere within our life. And when and a lot of times we're creating music. An example of an edge would be the ground upon which we walk. We're split between the sky and the earth. And so in the very present moment, a vibration is being created. And that present moment, if you go to its very source, it's really an edge that's where we're being split. And it's creating a vibration, and that vibration is us. That is why I named the site Nature's Edge Music.
Great. Well, thank you for the backstory, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you.
Your music.
I enjoyed sharing.
And for this final piece, I will leave you with one song that Earl was kind enough to play live with me. He played it on his bass flute, and the song is inspired by a whale.
Listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music. You are listening to Freio Music.